Hello folks, welcome to the Edupedia world, and I am Abhinay Gupta. Today again we'll continue with the same topic, the meeting of the board and its directors. Right? So in our previous lecture we had done the couple of questions based on section 173. We have understood the topic in detail. Right? So today we'll continue with section 174. And before commencing on to that portion, we would try to brief you in just 2 minutes, a rapid briefing, a rapid summary of section 173, right? So that you keep in touch with the provisions while we are moving ahead. So in section 173, we dealt with 5 basic sections. 173.1 that dealt with the meeting of the board. 173.2 that dealt with the modes of attending the meeting, the video conferencing, audio visual, etc. 173 subsection 3, the notice of the meeting. 173 subsection 4, the penalty, and 173 subsection 5 about the minimum number of meetings for other companies. Right? So when we talked about the minimum number of meeting of the board in section 173 subsection 1, it says that the first meeting of the board should be held within 30 days from incorporation, and there should be a minimum of 4 board meetings in every year. Right? And the intervening period between 2 board meetings should be a maximum of 120 days, which is somewhere equivalent to 4 months. Right? And then CG may either exempt or modify these provisions for any class of companies. Right? And as per subsection 2, we saw that the director should be present, he should discuss, and he can vote in any meeting either in person or in video conferencing or in audio visual conferencing, audio visual methods, right? But the video conferencing and audio visual method should be capable of recognizing the director, recording the meeting, and storing with date and time, right? And Rule 4 exempts certain matters that cannot be conducted via audiovisual methods or video conferencing, and those are really important matters. Discussing a financial statement, signing a board report, mergers, acquisitions, discussing on those topics. That is a very critical topic, and for that, Rule 4 says that the board needs to meet. Right? And CG may exempt certain matters from the video conferencing, etc. by giving a notification in the official gazette. Now when we talked about the notice of the meeting, the notice has to be sent at least 7 days before the board meeting is to be held. So 7 days is the period of the notice. Right? And the notice actually contains the place, date, time. Agenda is not a compulsion. Right? And it has to be in written always. And it has to be delivered to the director at registered office, and we have seen that the registered address may be in India or outside India. It just depends on what the director has got it registered with the company for securing the communication. It has to be written, it could be given to the directors either delivery in hand or by post or by email or any other mode. Right? Now 7 days is not always a compulsion. If there is an urgent business and you don't have 7 days in hand, then you could send a shorter notice too. Right? But the condition for the meeting to be conducted via a shorter notice is that at least one independent director should be holding the meeting, should be present in the meeting. And if that is not possible, if the independent director is not able to come, there is another relaxation that you should hold the meeting and circulate the decision to all the directors. And then at least one independent director should ratify the meeting. If even that is done, we would consider it to be a valid provision of section 173 subsection 3. And if there is a default in notice, then every director who is involved, or actually every director of the company, should be penalized with a penalty that is worth rupees 25,000. Now as per section 173 subsection 5, when we talk about one-person company, small company or dormant company, they will have to hold at least 2 meetings. Right? The provision of holding 4 meetings are not applicable on them. They are required to hold a minimum of 2 meetings in a year, and 1 in each half of the calendar year. Right? And the gap between 2 meetings should be more than 90 days. Right? And if there is only one director into the company, then provisions of section 173 and as well as 174 that we will be reading today will not be applicable on that company. And then we have also discussed the questions that have appeared in your previous examinations, and with that I hope the provisions of section 173 is very clear with you. We have seen it as an important topic because it has been asked frequently in your previous examinations. So let's move forward to section 174, the quorum of the board meeting. Now one more important topic. Now when we talk about quorum, what do we basically intend to say? The quorum is actually the minimum number of directors who are competent to transact any business in a meeting or to vote on any business. That means quorum is basically the minimum number of directors needed to run a board meeting, needed to constitute a board to be eligible to hold a meeting. And unless the quorum is maintained, no business can be transacted at a board meeting. So, what is the quorum? What is the minimum number of directors required? So, the quorum would be higher of either 1/3 of the total strength or 2 directors, right? Whichever is higher. And any fraction contained in 1/3 would be rounded off to the nearest one. Sorry, should be rounded off as 1. That means it would be rounded up. We had seen the similar case when we were discussing about the rotational director, right? The 2/3 of the total number of directors. Over there also we had seen the similar provision. We had to round up the fraction. And when we discussed about the retiring director out of the remaining 2/3, there we talked about the provision that 1/3 would be rounded off. That means the nearest integer. It will not always be the next integer. And in this case, in the case of quorum again, it would be the next integer, right? Rounded up. And total strength would not include the directors whose places are vacant for the moment. Now, this is a condition when the situation is normal, when there are not much interested directors. But in the situations where the number of interested directors exceed 2/3 of the total number of directors in the company, then the limitations for quorum they change. In that situation, the quorum would be the number of remaining directors, that is, the disinterested directors that are present in the meeting, or 2 directors, right? Whichever is higher. That means the quorum will be all non-interested director up to the minimum of 2. Anyways you would like to say, like you hold your ear from your left hand or your right hand, whichever way you want. And if the quorum is not present in the meeting would be adjourned. And it would be adjourned to the same place, same time, same date next week. And if that next week is a public holiday, a national holiday, then it would be the succeeding day that is not a national holiday, right? And if, for example, there is a situation that even in the adjourned meeting, no quorum was maintained, or to say quorum could not be completed, then what? So the act remains silent on that point. Right? So all that we can assume is that again, if the quorum is not present, the meeting cannot be held. That means the meeting needs to be cancelled. And for the want of quorum, as we have already seen in 173 subsection 2 when we were discussing that, yeah, if a person is attending the board meeting via a video conferencing also, he would be included in counting the quorum, right? And in a situation where the board meeting has been adjourned due to want of quorum, there is no requirement of sending fresh notice. This is also what we have seen in section 173 subsection 3, right? There is no requirement of a fresh notice. So if we are not holding a board meeting at all for want of quorum, like even it was adjourned and still we could not hold it, and then due to that reason, if you're not able to attain the minimum requirement of your 4 board meetings in the year, then will that be a valid contravention of section 173? Or would you be relaxed that, okay, you made an attempt, but since there was no quorum, we would consider that to be 1 count in the 4 meetings. Will that be so? The answer is no. The answer is a straight no. When the section 173 subsection 1 says that you will have to hold 4 board meetings, that means you will have to hold 4 board meetings. Calling a board meeting does not intend holding a board meeting. Calling and holding are 2 different things. Unless and until you hold a board meeting, that means you did not discuss anything, you did not finalize anything. And the purpose of setting the minimum number of board meetings in a year is that the board is like in continuous discussion. They know as to the current position of the company. They discuss, they work out. Right? If they just call a meeting and they don't attend the meeting, then no purpose is solved. Right? And even if there are some vacancies in the board, the continuing directors would continue to act. They would not wait for those directors to come back to fill up the vacancies, right? But if at any point of time the total number of directors fall less than the quorum required, that means the vacancies have increased so much that the total number of directors are lower than the quorum. You don't have as much director to hold a meeting in any way. So how do you hold a meeting? You don't hold a meeting. In that scenario, if you hold a meeting, you can transact only two matters. Number one is that you hold a meeting to either increase the number of directors, or number two, the meeting to summon a general meeting. For no other purpose you can hold a board meeting when you have no quorum, right? Or actually when the total number of directors fall below the requirement of quorum. So you can have no quorum. So first increase the number of directors so that you are eligible to hold the board meeting as per the quorum, and then you can continue your business, right? And when we are talking about quorum, right, and we say that if quorum is not present, we cannot conclude the meeting, we cannot actually begin the meeting. What does that mean? Does that mean that the quorum is required only at the beginning of the meeting? No. Quorum is actually required for transacting each and every business of the company. So if the quorum is present in the beginning of the meeting and the meeting is kick-started, but then the quorum reduces, if the director leaves and the quorum goes down, the limit for the members go below the limit of quorum, and then again some decisions are taken, what will be the conclusion? So as a conclusion, the decisions that were taken up to the time the quorum was present would be valid. But when the directors left, and then the number of remaining directors, they fell below the limit of quorum, then the subsequent decisions would not be entertained. Right? The subsequent decisions would fall invalid. And when we are talking about the adjourned board meeting, there is one thing that we need to keep in mind, that the provisions that are decided or discussed or concluded in the adjourned general meeting, the decisions that are taken in the adjourned general meeting would be applicable, or if we look at the date on which the decision was taken, that would be considered the date of the adjourned general meeting. They would not be linked back to the original meeting that has been adjourned, right? So if any decision has been taken, we will not say that that decision was taken in that board meeting if it was not. If it was taken in the adjourned board meeting, we would say it was taken in the adjourned board meeting on so and so date. So that will be effective from that day onwards. And in the beginning of the section, we have already seen that this section does not apply to one-person company where they have only one director. What meeting will you call here? Come on, you don't need a quorum for that, because you can never have a quorum. So now we move on to the next section, section 175. So section 175 deals with the resolution by circulation. So what do we basically mean by a resolution by circulation? Basically that means that there is no requirement of holding a board meeting. That means instead of holding a board meeting, you get a resolution passed, right? You get a matter discussed and vote for that. Generally the board of directors, they act in the board meeting, they discuss and they vote in a board meeting. But as per section 175, they are also entitled to pass a resolution by circulation, right? And that will be read along with rule 5 of the company's meetings of the board and its power rule 2014. So basically, when do we pass a resolution by circulation? So there are certain situations for that. Number one for it being that if some important business could not be voted upon in the board meeting that was conducted, which means a board meeting was conducted but could not conclude on any one of the decisions or some of the decisions, then those decisions or those matters can be taken forward to the resolution by circulation. Because as per the board, that matter cannot be deferred till the next board meeting. And hence, since it was already discussed but not voted, that can be taken forward to the method of resolution by circulation, right? The other business, the lighter business that relates to basically the routine matters, right, for which they don't deem fit to hold a board meeting, right, because holding a board meeting is a cumbersome process. But if it is a routine matter, they can just pass a resolution by circulation. And the other point that could actually instigate the board to pass a resolution by circulation is that the cost of holding the board meeting would be very high. Now, for example, if there is just one decision to be taken and for that you call a board meeting and some directors are out of town and you need to bear the flight tickets to get them back to the town and then hold the meeting, it makes no sense, right? Bearing so much of cost for one particular task, for one particular decision. So in that case, the board may decide to pass a resolution by circulation, right? But yeah, there are certain matters that have to be discussed in a board meeting. Those matters cannot be taken for circulation. Right? Other than them, the other matters that they generally discuss in a board meeting, that can be passed on to be voted by a circulation, the resolution can be passed by a circulation, right? But if only in the above three conditions that we have seen. Now we would see the various conditions for passing a resolution by circulation. So a draft resolution along with the necessary papers. Now what are necessary papers? So necessary papers would be all such documents which are required to understand actually the nature of the business that are about to be transacted, right? So those are basically the reference papers. So those necessary papers along with the draft resolution should be sent or say circulated to all the directors, and that will be circulated to them at their address in India, the registered address in India, right? As we have seen that the notice could be sent to the registered address and that could be located outside India. But for this purpose, we would send the draft resolution only to those locations that are registered and located in India, right? So keep that point of difference in your mind, right? And these documents can be sent either by hand delivery or by post, courier, email or any other method, right? As per the provisions of Rule 5. And then that resolution would be passed only when it is approved by the majority of directors. Now the majority of what? Majority of those directors who are entitled to vote on the resolution, right? And similar to the board meeting where we saw that the directors who are interested in the contract are not allowed to participate in the discussion or vote. Similarly, those directors will not be allowed to vote even for the resolution by circulation. Clear with that point? Now, somewhere between the circulation of the draft resolution and the necessary paper and the approval of the majority, approval by the majority, somewhere in between, not less than 1/3 of the total number of directors may require that the resolution should be passed in the board meeting. They may require that, yeah, we should hold a board meeting for a discussion. Just the necessary papers or documents will not be enough for us to understand, right? We have some points for debate. We have some points to be questioned. So for that, they can ask the board to call for a meeting. And if the total number of people asking, demanding the same is more than 1/3 of the total number of directors, then the chairperson shall call for a meeting, right? And then the decision would be taken in the board meeting as it is generally been taken. So we have seen the situations when the resolution by circulation can be passed, but there are certain matters that could not be resolved or that could not be passed by a resolution by a circulation because the act says that it has to be passed in the board meeting only. Now if we take an example for that, then the decision for filing the casual vacancy of a director or the power of the board to make calls on the share, right, or to issue the securities, borrow money, invest fund, any of such kind of decisions, right, as per section 179. Or if you refer to section 172, making any political contribution, making loan, giving guarantee, providing securities as per 186, right. So these decisions cannot be taken by a resolution by circulation because the act says that you will have to call a board meeting for them, right? And this list is an inclusive list. It is not an exhaustive list. There can be other matters that the act would say or the article would ask, or there can be a decision that yes, this matter would be only taken up in the board meeting and the resolution by circulation would not be allowed for the same. And the resolution that is passed by the circulation, right, that will also be noted and entered in the minutes, right, but that would be noted in the subsequent board meeting, right, and that should be made part of the minute of such subsequent board meeting only. Right? You will not have a separate minute for this resolution by circulation, but that would be included in the minute of the subsequent board meeting, right? And also the committee of directors, they may also pass a resolution by circulation in accordance with the provisions. So it is not just about the board of directors, it is also for the committee of directors. Section 175 is applicable to them as well. So that will be all for the lecture today, right? We'll continue the other provisions and the questions of these provisions in the next lecture. So until then, this is Abhinay Gupta signing off. Thank you. Bye-bye.